1160 WCCSradio.com. Bob Pollock is with us this morning. Bob Pollock is, of course, the Extension Director here in Indiana. Our visit presented by Marcus & Mack, voted best law firm and best personal injury lawyer 3 years in a row in the Best of Indiana County contest. Visit them online at marcusandmack.com. Good morning to you.
Good morning. There's no director in my name. That's ancient history.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
You're going back, well, we were just talking about the past.
You're my director.
Yeah.
All right. Hey. Last week we started a discussion of people who want to grow plants indoors, starting them in January and then going toward the growing season. And we talked last week about lighting. Today I want to talk about humidity and moisture for these plants as we are beginning to grow them indoors. And we talked last week about maybe you were starting some tomatoes indoors, some lettuce, things of that nature. And I know that the needs for each plant will be different. The soils will maybe be different as well, depending upon what you're planting. But in an overall sense, let's talk first about the humidity in a room if you're growing plants indoors in the wintertime when naturally it's dry anyway.
Yeah, and a lot of times with this, we've got to deal with the conditions we have. And it definitely varies from house to house and location to location, especially if you're trying to adapt an area to that versus having a small greenhouse or, something like that, that you can control those things a little bit more. We like to have, usually in the winter in most of our homes, it's not humid enough. We're always fighting with drier air. So some people might have a humidifier on, within their heating system, or they might put a pot of water on top of their wood burner or something like that to help increase the humidity a little bit. We like to, most plants will adapt to that pretty well. It's good to we like to keep the foliage as dry as possible, or be able to dry it off as quickly as possible. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about how you're going to water plants. But the humidity, we can, most plants are going to deal with that okay. And then if you build, we talked a little bit last week about building a little bit of a structure. Maybe you put a piece of plastic over top of a table just to help hold a little bit of, keep that humidity level up a little bit, have a little bit more of a controlled environment for the plants to grow. And there are a lot of different systems that that are already available that you can purchase, and you can do that. And they might be shelving units that have lights on every shelf, on the underside of every shelf, so that you can have layers of plants to grow there. Those systems might also include some sort of a drainage system, so that when you water, you don't have water going all over the floor. So that's something else to kind of keep in mind, is when you are watering, where's the water going, the excess water? Do you have containers or flats that will hold a little bit of that extra moisture, or is it going to run out the bottom and then run across the surface and then drip onto the floor? So just kind of as you're setting things up, kind of think about that. What's going to happen to that? How will you contain that and deal with that? And you can look at some of these systems that are out there and build your own, because it doesn't have to be anything fancy. You can build your own temporary shelving unit, hook some lights to it, and get the same results, as going with a commercial system. So just, they're all options, and you can spend very little money or spend a lot, depending on the route you want to go.
Yeah.
But yeah, moisture and then having light there. Most plants are okay to germinate in light. There are some specific plants, like some of the flowers and things like it dark to germinate. They won't germinate if you have light on them. So you need to kind of, again, go back to what are you trying to grow or start. It might be a little bit early to start tomatoes unless you have an indoor structure where you plan to grow them. If you're going to grow them in a greenhouse, then yeah, you might be starting them now. If you're, some people are veterans at this. They've been doing this for years. Other people might just be starting out. So don't try to go, oh, I'm going to grow 300 plants, right off the bat.
Well, you might put in 300 plants hoping that 2 or 3
Yeah,
might
2 or
survive.
3, three germinate and grow. So kind of be selective at first, especially if you're starting from scratch and trying this out. Just do a little bit, get the hang of it, see how it works, and then you can expand. In space-wise too, that can be a limiting factor.
Sure.
How much space do you actually have to do this?
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be vegetable plants. You can start with, if you want to start with food plants, you can start with, a grouping of herbs to start those, and some lettuces, some of those plants that don't take as long to mature, that you can grow from seed to have a crop in 45 days. So a month and a half to 2 months, you'll be able to reap some benefits from your efforts.
Yeah.
And then other, you may not be interested in doing that. Maybe you want to grow some flowers. Maybe there's some specific flowers that you haven't been able to purchase, or you've seen them and say, oh, I'd like to try that, but you don't know if you'll be able to get them locally. You can get the seeds and try that out and see how it goes. So there's a lot of things that you can,
and considerations as well. So when we talk about humidity, certainly we want it to be humid enough because the plants will draw that moisture out of the air. What about when we're watering the soils, whether it's individual pots or a tray. However it is that we've set that up? Oversaturation can be a problem.
And in most cases, we're going to there are seed starting soils, potting soils. They're very light, fine, very well drained, and that's what a lot of seeds and little tiny seedlings with a very small root system need. They need good drainage. They need to be able to grab moisture, but they don't. If we have a soil that's too heavy, say we take soil from outside in our yard, and we mix that in, or we try to use that, that doesn't work very well for starting a lot of seeds. Bigger seeds, yeah, we can get away with that. But a lot of smaller seeds, really have to be careful with that and not get overwatered. But most potting soils, so there's seed starting soils. There's other, potting soils that if you're going to transplant, that's the other thing. Depending on the type of containers you use, you can use old egg cartons, to start seedlings in, and those small volumes tend to work better because then you don't have as big a volume of soil, so it tends to match the root system and the small plants you have, and then you size that up as you go.
Yeah. All right. Just took a call from a lady. She said, please ask him this. She didn't want to ask on the air, but she authorized me to ask you. Her sister gave her orchids for Christmas, and so she wants to know how does she grow them. I am assuming she gets is this a bulb? It comes in a bulb? Or
well, orchids are a very interesting and neat plant. They don't grow very fast, usually. Try to keep them a little bit, that 70 to 75 degree air temperature. You don't necessarily need to have them, where they're exposed to full sun, but they need light. You don't want to have them in a shady location. You want to get them closer to a window where they can get more light. So a little, higher light, but they don't need to be beat on by the sun. Watering, there's different thoughts on watering. Some people, you can read where it says, put a ice cube in the pot once a week, and that's how you should water.
That would
you
be
literally
all that
take
it would need?
Yeah, you take an ice cube and you lay that in your container on your plant, and that'll cover it. I've done that it works. But you can take the same volume of water that an ice cube would have and do the same thing. I think the point is that you can overwater orchids in a hurry. They don't need a lot of moisture, so just be very careful about that. Check the soil moisture, and usually the potting soils that those are in are pretty coarse textured soils, just because of that. So we just want and a little bit higher humidity. We don't want to get too dry air, so even having a little saucer underneath where the plant's not sitting in water, but it's there, and there is moisture to evaporate around the plant. Higher light, reasonable temperatures. You don't want them where there's a lot of drafts or anything like that. And that's about it. Yeah. A lot of times they just kind of sit and look at you. It takes a long time for those things to grow new leaves. I have one right now that shot out a flowering stalk. And oftentimes in the store, they're always blooming when you buy them. And then when that bloom's done, it's a green plant, and it's just kind of there. And sometimes you can have trouble getting them to rebloom again. But if you keep them in just in that, you might only get 1 or 2 new leaves in a whole year. So
don't be disappointed.
Don't be disappointed. Don't don't look at it every day and think, boy, there's not much happening here. Well, there's not. But it's a really cool, interesting plant. A little bit higher light levels, a little bit, average to a little bit higher in humidity, in a window where it'll get enough light, and then be careful on the watering.
There you go.
You should be all right.
All right. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
It is Indiana in the Morning on WCCS 101.1 FM. IRMC's Diabetes and Mental Health Series discusses goal setting at 11 a.m. on Tuesday in Conference Room 1 at IRMC. Call 724-357-8088 to reserve your spot for this free event from the Diabetes Education Center and Social Services.